Hey guys, how's it going? This is Adam, and I'm going to be doing a little SketchUp tutorial. Well, maybe not so little, it might be a little longer than you'd like, but it's going to be a intro on how to get a site model for Ames, or for any site in general. So this is for the LA 402 Studio Urban Design at Iowa State University, but hopefully this might help out some other people since it's probably going to end up on YouTube. So, Dylan Schroeder in the ISU class sent me this file of CAD lines. And it's a great file to start working on for 3D models because it has lots of closed polylines and good layer organization as well. So these closed polylines are great. They came out of GIS, and so our blocks are closed polylines, our buildings are, even our ground planes, so our paving and our sidewalks are all closed polylines. And this is really great for 3D modeling. What I've also done is I've created a few blocks in the file for trees here. Created 2 different types of trees. I've created 4 different car blocks for the different orientations of cars in this angled parking lot. And I've also created railroad ties and arrayed with the path array tool in AutoCAD about 1,000 of them. So yeah, we'll see how far we get in the 3D modeling. But a little bit of prep work is needed before we go to that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type a command called lay ISO. So in my bottom left corner of the screen here, you guys can see the commands I'm typing, LAY ISO, and I'm going to hit enter. And I'm just going to select this road layer and hit enter. And so what that does is that just isolates those objects. It isolates that layer. Good naming, AutoCAD. So I'm going to select all of those objects, and I'm going to type the command W block and hit enter. And it pulls up this little dialog box. Now, again, I have selected objects checked here, and I'm going to hit browse. And I've created a folder here. Inside of this folder, I have a folder called W block layers to SketchUp. So what this is these are just files that I'm going to create, one file for each layer of the AutoCAD. And so I'm just going to save back to 2004, something I've just found generally works better when you're exporting to 3D programs, whether it be SketchUp, Rhino, 3ds Max. For some reason, programs just like it better sometimes if it's an older version of AutoCAD that's going into them. So if I were to name this file 01-paved roads and hit save, for me it's going to say, do you want to replace the file? And I say yes. But for you guys, it's just save in file. So right block, replace the existing. Okay, so we've exported that one as its own separate CAD file now. And I'm going to type lay uniso. That's going to bring back those layers for me. So what I would do is I would do this same command, lay ISO, and let's say we select our parking lots. Again, I could select them and type W block, and we could go through that same process of browsing and saving out our parking lots. But I'm not going to do that right now. So lay on ISO, I'm just going to go back to my main CAD file. And this is kind of where we're at. We're going to leave this file for now, and we are going to go over to SketchUp and start modeling. Okay, so in SketchUp, I have already imported all of these layers one at a time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to import one of them. So File, Import, this is really simple. And you're going to just navigate to where you send that. So my desktop is where I save almost everything. LA 402, and then my W block layers folder. And you can see I have all my files in here. Now, I imported all of these on a computer that has SketchUp Pro. You're going to need SketchUp Pro in order to import these CAD files. I switched over to my Mac in order to do this screen recording video. Yeah, so you guys can go to the lab and use the lab computers at Iowa State for SketchUp Pro or wherever it is that you guys need to go. And I am going to stop this video. This is going to be video 1, and I will upload multiple videos. So SketchUp modeling will be in video number 2. Thanks, guys. Okay, guys, so back into SketchUp here. and I really haven't done any work other than I started to get some faces on my blocks since we last spoke, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and turn off my layers here. Oops, can't hide the current layer. I'm going to make my current layer these paved roads, and I'm just going to turn off these SketchUp layers here. And these are just the AutoCAD layers that imported automatically with the CAD file. So if you ever want to get your layers menu, go to Windows, Layers here in SketchUp in order to find that layers menu. So what we have here is the imported roads line work and some new faces. So that line work imported as a group in SketchUp, and so I can double click into it and then start editing that line work if I wanted. Now in order to get these faces, what I'm doing is I'm hitting L for line tool, or I can click up here on the pencil, and then I'm just tracing edges on these blocks in order to get them to become faces. So if I were to come over here to another one, trace an edge, oops, it doesn't always work. You can get your blocks to become faces. So that's what I've done for this main section of the model that we're going to be working on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I am going to, what am I going to do next? I apologize for not thinking of that. I'm going to come in and I'm going to start extruding these blocks about 1/2 foot in order to simulate a curb is what I am going to do. What I'm going to do first is actually paint them green so that they become grass. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to go to colors in my paint bucket, and if my colors menu would switch over. Apologize for my computer being slow just pulling up a menu. This is what happens when you overload them. Okay, so we are into our color menu, and let's pick something not too gaudy. And I'm just going to start coloring faces green. So I can close this menu, and I still have my paint bucket tool here, you can see. And I'm just going to click on these faces, and they're going to become green. One more. Okay. So once I have that, I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab my push-pull tool, or I could hit P on my keyboard. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to drag up a little bit, and I'm going to type 6 inches. And hit enter. And you can see that I pulled that up 6 inches in the model. So if I go back to my tool, I'm just going to double click on the next one and it's going to go up that same distance, which is great. So all I have to do is go around and double click on these faces. So if I want to see my whole model, I can go Shift Z, and that's going to zoom out to the entire model. So P for push-pull, and just keep double-clicking on these faces. I don't have to get them all for this case, but I should probably get all the main ones here. Maybe a couple more over here. So P, double-click. So we're still using that same distance. And that's probably good. So we've pulled up those objects, which is great. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to bring in another layer and start working on that. But first I'm going to save my model. So File, Save. And I'm just calling this imported CAD blocks is my file. You could name it whatever you want. So the next thing I'm going to work on is paved parking. I'm going to turn that block on. So you can see that that turns on, and these are my paved parking areas. So I'm going to double click into those in order to get that block active. And then what I'm going to do, actually I'm not going to double click into it. I'm going to select it out here. And because I want parking on top of grass, you can see if I go over here, our lines are underneath that. So I'm going to zoom into an edge here just to illustrate this for you. And with that selected, I'm going to hit M for move. I'm going to grab an edge and move it straight up that ½ foot. So now you could see of my blocks, so that grass that we extruded. So now what's great is I can come in and create these parking lot faces. So if I double click on this group, I can hit my L command, and as I start creating faces here, I can grab the face and I can pull it up. This time I'm just going to type 1 inch. So what I'm doing is I'm basically just lying to the computer and telling it just draw that 1 inch above the grass so that it looks like it's not intersecting it in the model. And so okay, so once we get our parking lot starting to pull up, we can keep going around, tracing edges, and getting things to work for us. So what I did here on this one is we actually we traced it so that we got the islands separate from our main face. So you can see if I click this, the face intersects these islands, whereas on this one it doesn't because I traced those separately, which is great in terms of being able to control that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that interior face so that we see through to our grass. And for 1 inch, I'm just going to extrude this up by 1 inch. So there we can see that island. Now I'm not going to do that on all of these. I'm not even going to pull up any more of the parking lots. This is just probably enough for this example on this project. So you can see kind of how we would start to get our site. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn on what's next. How about sidewalk? So again, I'm going to grab our sidewalks. There's our block, and we need to move that up that 0.5 feet. So I'm going to zoom way in. I'm going to move it up 6 inches vertically. So it's on top of our green. So let's go into this park area right off of Main Street here, where Mike Martin sometimes plays his instruments on a Saturday during the farmer's market. And I'm just going to double click into that group. I'm going to use my L command. And I'm going to come in and start tracing some of these edges. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close off this sidewalk area so that it becomes all a shape. So this island right here can get deleted. And again, you saw how I created that one separately so that it didn't intersect with the faces, which is nice to do. And so if I trace one edge of that, I can get the next island out. Come in, trace it into that island, trace it into that island, and we can delete those islands out, just so that our park starts to look a little bit better with these paths. Now again, I'm going to come in on my sidewalk, I'm going to use my push-pull tool, and I'm going to pull it up 1 inch just to get it above that grass like that, so that it starts to look better. And why don't we go ahead and do this other sidewalk area here as well, just for the sake of it. So trace that island, trace that island. I'm just doing this ahead of time rather than after, it doesn't really matter. Then I'm going to trace the main shape so that I can delete these islands. And I can pull this up 1 inch, and I've got my sidewalk. Now let's say we want in our park space a little bit different material. We can come into colors. Here, I'm just going to make it a nice gray. Isn't that a lovely sidewalk color? And I know a lot of you guys are way further ahead of this in SketchUp And some of you guys are wanting Rhino training, which I will do later on for you guys. This is just a SketchUp model to see how you guys like these video tutorials and if they help out in your studios this semester. So what I'm going to do from here is let's turn on some building footprints. Let's start doing something exciting. Yeah, pulling up buildings is going to be so exciting. So let's see if we can find a place to grab a building. Okay, so there's our buildings. And I'm going to go ahead and actually not select them right away. So I'm not thinking. I need to move them up. How far? Yep, 6 inches. Now, one thing I could have done if I was really intelligent when I had done this is I could have moved my road blocks actually down 6 inches at the beginning rather than extruding them up, and then I wouldn't have had to move each layer one at a time later. Probably would have been the more intelligent thing to do. But we all know that designers are not always the most intelligent people, are we? So again, just tracing edges here in order to get the faces. Almost had it. There we go. A couple buildings. Let's just do 2 more here. We're just going to do this corner of Main Street. So that's that one. And there's that one. Okay, so I traced my edges, and what's next? I am going to push pull. Now, one thing with buildings is I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this here. I'm going to do something surprising. I'm going to go into my translucent materials, and I am just going to select this blue glass see-through material here. And I'm going to paint 2 of these buildings with it. And I'll show you why in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up these buildings, and when I do that, I'm not specifying a distance, but I could click on one and then type, say, 20 feet and pull it up a specific distance. I'd probably pull that first one up a little too far, but you guys get the point. Now, the other option here is these buildings that I didn't materialize, pull them up, and they just come up as that normal SketchUp material. Now, that's fine if that's the material I want, but if I wanted a translucent material or some other material, it's easier to paint just one face of the building and then pull it up than it is to pull up the building first. Or than it is to pull up the building first and then come in with my paint bucket and start painting each face of the building. That's kind of annoying. Now, let me show you one more option here that I forgot about in terms of how to do this with a building. So I'm just going to start using Command-Z here in order to go back a little ways to before I pulled up this building. What I can do in order to make this model much more dynamic, or should I say easier to edit, is I can double click on the face, and what that's going to do is select that face and all of its edges. If I right click and say make group, this is truly how you should probably model buildings when you do this. Is now all of those faces and that face and all of its edges are one group. So if I double click into that group, I can pull it up, right? Then I can get out of the group, and that whole building is a group. So I can paint that group as one. And let's say I want to edit the height of the building. I can hit my S command for scale, right? Then come in and just edit the height of the building as a group, which is very nice. Or I could just move the building to a different location. So having your buildings as specific groups when you model them is relatively nice when it comes to building this model. So you can already see we have a pretty effective model here. The next thing I'm going to do is turn on the blocks. So I'm turning on my trees. I'm going to stay on layer 0. railroad block, what other, and I'm also going to turn on cars. So that's a little confusing, everything there. So let's go ahead and turn off, well, what the heck. We're just going to come in, and all of those were imported as one CAD file. So all of those blocks were imported as one CAD. I W blocked all of those layers out at once, so again, let's just move those up 0.5 feet, or 6 inches. So now I have all of these symbols on my surface. And honestly, that doesn't look too bad as a model, does it? You know, you're starting to get the idea of the space. But what if I want some 3D trees? So I have another file here that I've already gone to the Get Models button, and I've searched, say, tree in the Sketchup library, and I've selected trees. I selected really simple symbols for this model, but you can get some really nice 3D trees out on the Sketchup library. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab this lovely pink tree here from this other file, and I'm going to go Command Copy. And you could import these directly to your original file. And I'm just going to paste it into this model file. So once I have it here, that's great, but it's only one tree, and I want lots of them in this park, let alone my streetscape. So if I go into this block here, I can double click into it. Now there's also these blocks that were created in AutoCAD, which are now components in SketchUp. So I'm going to double click into that and do Command V here and watch what happens. Once I place this tree, I get a tree on every one of those SketchUp components. So let's just delete that and say we're done with putting our trees in. Isn't that great? Now, I didn't get my location exactly right, did I? Let's move that. So we can double click into that block. Once I'm in there, I can grab my tree and move it roughly close enough to the correct point. So it's orbit, and we can start to see our park there. Doesn't that look beautiful? Oh, we have an extra tree floating inside of the building. Isn't that lovely? It's probably somewhere inside Grateful Deli. Okay. Now we can do the same thing with our street trees. I'm going to go over tree. If my computer would stop slowing down. So Command Copy, so Command C on a Mac, Control C on a Windows machine. Command V or Control V, and we're going to place our tree. Whoops, undo that. I was not inside the component, was I? You have to be inside the single component. So see how only this is dark and all the others went gray? That's how you know when you're really inside of there. So Command V. And let's place that tree. And look at that. I'm going to do Shift Z in SketchUp to zoom extents. And I'll zoom back in here with my mouse a little bit. And look how many trees we have on our streetscape now. Isn't that just dandy? Sorry, this screen is jumping a little bit. So let's come in here and do cars, because a lot of people do this sort of thing for trees, but not everybody thinks to do it for other elements such as a car. So if I come into one of these blocks here, and I go back over to my other SketchUp file to get the car that I already found, I'm going to grab this really simple car, and I am going to paste it into here. And you can see it pastes them like that on each of car number 1 block. But that's not exactly how I want it. I wanted it rotated. So I'm going to grab the rotate tool, and I'm just going to rotate this car at the angle I think it should be at, and it's going to start filling up this parking lot. Apologize, my computer is zooming uncontrollably. So there's one version of the car. Now, I'm not going to do all of them. Let's just go into this row 2. Here. If I double click into one block, Command V, put the front of the car there, but that's not going to work, is it? So let's rotate to about that angle. Now, it's not quite in the right location, but that's okay because you guys get the idea that we can really quickly fill up a parking lot. Now, if I wanted to have been strategic about this and not end up with cars everywhere in every row, I would have deleted out some of my AutoCAD blocks so that it looked a little bit more natural. Or, let's say I had a straight 90-degree parking lot, and I didn't want to fill it with all one car in SketchUp. I could have made 4 different blocks and just used different colored cars in SketchUp to place it and quickly populate that block. I could do that with people. I could do that with stop signs in a model. You could do that with just about anything that needs to be repeated, or railroad ties. So I'm going to show you guys real quick on these railroad ties how to, rather than import something, just create an AutoCAD block and then edit it to create 3D geometry. So I go into one of them. Now I'm going to use my line tool to get the faces, and they all become faces. And then I'm going to pull them all up 6 inches and take a look at that. I have a whole ton of 3D railroad ties. Now, granted, those don't look like real railroad ties, but I think you guys get the point. And that is how to start creating your SketchUp base model. Let me know what you guys think, and hopefully we can do some more detailed or advanced SketchUp with terrain, some actual design modeling, and I would love to teach you guys Rhino, so let me know if this kind of tutorial is actually helping you guys out.